Good evening and welcome to the smoking section. My name is Emily Ouija, and tonight I'm very pleased to welcome a very special guest who's joining us via Skype from the UK. His name is Frank Davis, and he is a very well-known blogger. The tagline of Frank Davis's blog is "banging on about the smoking ban," which is apt as far as it goes, but I would say too modest. I would describe Frank Davis as foremost a free thinker. His free thinking is contagious, and he manages to write about art, science, philosophy, and somehow always bring it back to the totalitarianism and ridiculousness of the modern anti-smoking crusade. Welcome, Frank. So glad to have you with us. How are you?
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a great honor.
Oh, it's a great honor to have you here. I want to start with something that I feel like you often mention on your blog, and I feel like it's sort of a theme that runs through your blog, is and it has to do with the tagline of the blog as well, is that the UK smoking ban, that is when smoking was banned indoors, primarily in pubs, I think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, of 2007 really profoundly affected you. It changed your social life, it changed your politics.
Yes, it did. It didn't do that all at once, but the smoking ban itself, in fact, applies to pretty much all indoor areas, public indoor areas, not private houses, but certainly pubs, but also restaurants, cafes, clubs.
So is it, I know, so in the United States, I just want to explain for our viewers a little bit, because I think in the United States it's still very much a hodgepodge because we have so many different state and local laws. There's different states or different cities have different laws, but in the UK it was all kind of in one fell swoop in 2007.
Yeah, yes, it was, and it was a tremendous shock. It was really, I didn't know what was going to happen, But in my experience of it, and I think most other smokers anyway, the pub has sort of more or less just died. Because I used to go to my local pub in the afternoon just for an hour or so and sit inside with a beer and a cigarette and just meditate almost. And that all just ended that day. And there were people I knew, just acquaintances in pubs, and they all vanished. I hardly ever saw any of them again.
Right. And I know you've mentioned, at least I think I've read some of your posts expounding on this, that you didn't really hear a lot of complaints from smokers at the time about the ban. Is that correct?
Well, on the day itself, there was quite a memorable event when we got our pints. We all went outside, all the smokers, and somebody came up to me, a complete stranger, and he said, "It's not a free country anymore."
Wow. Huh.
And that was so precise and exact and true. But he was the only one, and he just came up to me out of sort of nowhere. And But I did a little survey about 6 months before, asking smokers what they expected it to be like, and they weren't too bothered. They'd say things like, "Well, it might help me to cut down a bit, and you'll just have to nip outside. It's not going to have a big effect."
Right. But I think I've noticed the same reactions, but I almost think it's something like however many stages there are of grief. They say that I think a lot of us have gone through different stages in the process, and some people I think got really angry right away. Other people, it might have taken years for them to get really angry. Other smokers really have never gotten angry about it, which is interesting.
I got enraged that day. I had the most humongous outbreak. In fact, I spent so much time in rage for the next 6 months that I started to get quite worried that I would have an apoplectic fit or something like that. And I spent a lot of
Yeah.
I thought I'd have to kind of calm myself down, and I did succeed, but I still get angry now.
Yeah, I think I consider myself to be one of those people that I don't think I really knew what was happening when there finally was a ban in bars or in pubs in the state I was living in at the time. I didn't think about it very much. I don't think I realized what it was going to mean until a couple of years later when I started to realize how it was starting to affect people psychologically. And I think that's when I really started to realize like there was a purpose behind it, maybe of trying to ostracize smokers and trying to make them, targets and objects of scrutiny, and trying to kind of force them into quitting. Before that, I'd never thought that there was any kind of ulterior motive to these bans.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, I think, the process for me has been quite a long-term process. I mean, when the band started up, there wasn't really very much of a kind of resistance movement in England. That got sort of gradually built up with blogs and websites. I think it took me a couple of years before I started my blog, accidentally. But I think one of the good things about it all is that, well, what we're doing right now, which is talking across the Atlantic.
Absolutely. I think in some ways it has helped people find a certain amount of solidarity. I know you've talked a lot about the community that online smokers have had with each other that they might not find in real life. But just the fact that we have the internet now, it is a way to bring people together who otherwise 20 years ago, 30 years ago might not have been able to find each other.
Yeah, well, I think there would be no way at all. I think it will be much, much worse but for the internet in so many ways.
I agree with you. Yeah.
And because just yesterday I had an email from a Russian, talking about him going on television, and I said, well, I'm going on television too, and one of the things I want to see is a sort of a network, a kind of global network of people who are, they may not agree about everything, but the more people talk to each other, I think the better. Anyway, that's.
No,
but going back,
absolutely. I think I was thinking about it today because you actually posted something today asking about what can smokers actually do to fight back against anti-smoking, because it seems like such a monumentous thing and sometimes so amorphous. It's difficult to know who the enemy is, where it's coming from. But I think just even reading your blog and reading the comments on your blog, I think people have a certain amount of fellowship and community even in spaces like that.
Yeah, that's true. I think there's a lot of information that comes into my blog. I've got some very good commenters, people who got a very acute point of view and turn up all sorts of things that I never would, because I'm much more of someone who kind of thinks about things rather than investigates. I can do that, but
that's true. But I think we need all kinds. As I said in my brief introduction, I really think of you as a thinker, a free thinker, and I think we need people who are skilled at investigating and skilled at debunking certain things, but also people who just let their thoughts roam free.
Well, that's what I do. Well, that's what I do. I used not to think that I would be able to write a blog. When I saw people doing it, I thought I couldn't do that. But I realized that I've actually spent my life writing a journal, handwriting it, and trying to put things into words as best I can, just for myself. And I think that's what's come through with my blog anyway, is that I write so much anyway that it's very easy for me to just take some subject and so I do that.
It's one of the things I really enjoy about your blog is that it's written in an almost conversational style. It just feels very immediate and very personal. At the same time, it's very. I just really enjoy the way that you relate different art, history, science, and you somehow find a way to make it relevant to anti-smoking.
Well, I always come back in the end to anti-smoking because when I wake up every day, pretty much when I wake up, I'm thinking about a smoking ban. Even now, it's 10 years on now since but I still think about it more or less every morning. I don't always write about it because sometimes I just don't have anything to say. And so then I'll write about something else, but quite often find a way of making it relevant to smoking because everything is interconnected in many ways.
And one thing I wanted to ask you about was I always wondered how you came up with the idea to start the Smokers Graveyard, and I'm going to try to show a graphic, if you'll bear with me for one moment. So the Smokers Graveyard, it was really, I thought, very unusual. It was kind of a revelation to me when I first saw it. And I'm just gonna pop this up on the screen so people can see the URL. Sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties. So it's, if you want to access this, it's thesmokersgraveyard.wordpress.com, and essentially, this is a separate blog, really, but it's entries really of smokers who have died because of smoking bans. Is that correct, Frank?
Yes, pretty much. Yes, that's it. I mean, what happened with that was that I kept reading online about people in nursing homes and old folks' homes in places like Canada who would go outside for a cigarette and be unable to get back into the home again because they'd been locked out inadvertently. And they died there. And I kept reading about this again and again and again. And I finally thought, these people are being killed by smoking bans. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, well, it'd be a good idea to pull a few of these together and just. So I've got quite a few now.
It's a shocking thing, and this reminds me actually of a comment I think someone left on your blog the other day saying that in Canada that the paramedics won't enter your house or have the right not to enter your house if you smoke indoors. I was just shocked to hear that.
Well, that was Riss. I'm not quite sure how you pronounce his name, but he came back the next day and he thought that perhaps they hadn't actually been banned, but they didn't have to come inside. I wasn't really quite clear about it, but he slightly rode back on it. But and that's another thing, because if ambulance workers can't come into a smoker's home, what happens if they fall down, break a hip or something like that, and what do? Just say, sorry, we can't come in.
Right, it's shocking, and that's why I find the Smokers Graveyard, I think, is a really important document and testament just to of people who you could say that it's almost verging on the exaggerated to say, okay, these people died because of smoking bans, but really that's what it is, because I remember there was one specific instance of I think it was a group of young people all out on a balcony, drinking and smoking, and the balcony collapsed.
Yeah, I think that was in San Francisco.
In San Francisco, that's right. And you could say, well, that's an unfortunate accident, but really, they wouldn't have all been out on that balcony if it hadn't been for indoor smoking bans.
Yeah, it's the same thing. The one that I remember the most is one which was of an old lady living in a flat in which she was she wasn't allowed to smoke, and she was hanging out the window smoking, and fell out.
Right. And
that was it.
Right.
And also another one that happened in New York, I think. It was someone visiting a friend, and she went out onto the balcony to smoke, sat on the edge.
Right, was it the fire escape, possibly? This sounds familiar.
No, this wasn't. There are fire escapes.
There's so many stories here.
And there are roofs and all sorts of things, but this was so sad because she sat down on the corner of this balcony and it gave way and she fell 5 floors or something like that.
And I believe one of the first entries, if I remember correctly, in the smokers' graveyard was a man who actually committed suicide shortly after the 2007.
Yeah, I remember that. I think that was a German guy. His business was dying, or something like that, and he committed suicide. I'm sure that's happened. Mm-hmm. I've noticed that there's been a sort of fewer and fewer reports of this sort, and I'm beginning to wonder, it's probably paranoia, but thinking tobacco control knows about the smokers' graveyard, so they won't put out any news about this. But I'm sure it's happening all the time.
I mean, it's not such a crazy, not such a crazy thought, because I do think there is a certain amount of censorship in the way the mainstream media talks about smoking. I mean, a good example is yesterday something I posted on our Cambridge Citizens for Smokers' Rights Facebook page. There was an article pointing out an Instagram account, and I can't remember the exact name. I think it was called like Smoke Breaks or something, and it's a guy in London who's taking photos of people in London outside smoking on their breaks, and they're really beautiful photos, just nice, thoughtful photos of smokers smoking. But the article that presented it, of course, gave the standard language at the beginning. Well, we all know smoking is bad for you, and I'm sure these people would like to quit, but in the meantime, here's some nice photos of smokers. So it's almost as if they're required to put in this kind of language now, or else it's not going to get printed.
Well, I kind of think that they are sort of required to put that kind of thing. I think certainly in Britain, I feel that the press and the media are very controlled. I don't know how it works, but there's no news about smokers at all.
Right.
You never hear anything about them.
It's so true. There's often news about smoking in terms of new regulation, usually new regulations, new laws, but there's never any news about smokers themselves.
Yes, that's exactly the case, and it's been like that for 10 years, maybe longer. I didn't notice before, but.
Mm-hmm. One thing I thought was interesting is in your blog today when you were talking about what smokers can do to fight back, some other commenters were, and I believe one other commenter was saying that just being visible smoking in a way is a form of activism. It's just being outside smoking on the street. I think one example he used was even just if you're a runner, like make a point of lighting up a cigarette right after you have a run, just showing smoking even in a positive light and just going against people's expectations, I thought was really interesting.
Well, what I like around where I live is the young mothers who come in with their sort of 2 or 3 year old sons and daughters and sit outside and light up, and I think wonderful.
Yeah, that's great. I know, it's good.
But there's very little. Where I am in England, there's very little. In fact, there's none at all, really, in terms of sort of disapproval of smokers being expressed to them. Smoking is perfectly normal. It's just people do it outside, and they don't want.
That's interesting. I'd venture to say that in Boston, at least, I'd say in certain parts of the U.S., it's definitely more frowned upon. I think things are changing quickly. I used to think that Boston wasn't quite as disapproving, but I think as time goes on, it gets more and more so. I think did we have a phone call? No. Yep, let me just pick up. Oop. Hi, you're on the smoking section.
Hi, my name is Paul Neff, and I've been watching intently. It's a great show, and I can feel myself getting fighting mad.
Hi, Paul, how you doing?
I'm good.
Did you have a question for Frank?
Yes. Well, I mean, I've been...
Paul, are you still there? Okay, I think we got disconnected. Sorry about that, Frank. I think that anything that we can do really to show smokers in a normal light. I know that Audrey Silk actually started a Facebook group called Smoking is Normal, where she's asking people to submit photos of themselves smoking, just really to get those images out there, those visuals. Yeah,
that's perfectly good. I mean, I think I like the way on the web, people like me are always finding usually pictures of pretty girls smoking,
I know some people who are fond of, actually Paul, who just called in, is very fond of seeing photos of women smoking as well.
Yeah, I think it's a sort of fetish for some people.
It is, that's true. Sorry. I thought we were getting another phone call, but I think they've hung up again. So I think I was starting to say earlier that I think there's a certain amount of disapproval in Boston, at least among a certain type of people, a certain class of people, which is unfortunate. So I've definitely noticed regional differences all over the United States, and I'm sure that people all over the world will have different experiences. But it's good to hear at least that where you live, you don't see disapproval.
Well, I think where I live is out in the countryside in England, in Herefordshire, and the general impression I have is that the English countryside is more or less sort of pro-smoking. It's the cities that are where all the trouble starts, with bans here and bans there and people. But it all seems very relaxed around where I live at the moment. That might change, but.
That's good to hear. Yeah, one thing I find in general, I think with globalism sort of being on the rise, I think that we're seeing that cities are very much embody globalism, and I think one globalist trend is to be anti-smoking. Unfortunately, at least at this point, who knows? That might change.
I think it will. I think that there's a growing sort of global resistance because 10 years ago there was nothing, and now there's lots of people. There's lots of people with their own blogs and their own.
True. Yep.
And they're connecting together, and I think that's just going to carry on and grow and build, and I hope that something comes out of it.
I do as well, and I think one thing that we as a group, Cambridge Citizens for Smokers' Rights, we do try to involve ourselves in more traditional activism when we can, such as speaking at council hearings and opposing regulations. But I think we're kind of coming to a strange nexus where there's already been so much regulation against smoking that unfortunately there is probably still more to come. But I think we've kind of already fought and lost the big battles. So we're kind of at this place now where there's not a whole lot to do in terms of traditional activism. So that kind of brings us into more non-traditional forms of activism, like we were discussing earlier, of just smokers networking with each other, trying to make smoking visible, trying to, just show people that it is normal. It's something that normal people still do.
Yeah, and there are a lot of us, and as I keep saying on my blog, there's something like 1.5 billion smokers in the world. That's an enormous minority, and I think if smokers start finding a voice, breaking through I don't know what the glass ceiling is the right word for it, but I think you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. We'll get heard more, and I'm sure that'll happen.
I think one thing that smokers have had to contend with up till now is, to a certain extent, that they've absorbed a lot of the brainwashing that has been out there about, that smoking is very bad for you, that it's bad for other people around you. I think what I'm starting to see is a tiny bit of pushback against that. And I think that's very hopeful.
Well, I certainly push back. I don't believe anything that I've ever been told about tobacco now. I don't believe I just reject it entirely, and I reject it in many ways on the grounds that I rejected sort of, take for example, Nazi Nazi racial science is something when I first came across it, I just rejected it, because if the result of what we're doing is this, I won't believe a word of their science. Mm-hmm. And that's a bit like how I feel about the anti-smoking movement.
It's almost the flip side of the ends justifies the means, really. It's kind of the reverse of that. Yeah.
But anyway, my position is becoming one which is harder and harder, and I'm not one of those people who's going to say, smoking's bad for you, but
right. I sense that a lot of people are growing tired of that sentiment. I think we've heard so much of that. Smoking's bad for you, but I feel like that's how we often, or at least people used to often argue the civil liberties part of it. But they were accepting the part that, it's really bad for you, it's terrible for everyone, but we still have civil liberties, and I think that is starting to die out a little bit, which is hopeful.
Yeah, I think so, because I think if you do that, smoking is bad for you, but you more or less concede everything at the outset, and that's no good.
Frank, we only have about 30 seconds left, so I want to say thank you so much for being on the show, and I also want to put up a graphic with your website address for everyone. So I'm going to do that right now. So you can find Frank Davis, and I highly recommend his absolutely wonderful blog. It's tfrankdavis.wordpress.com. Please check it out. It's absolutely brilliant. And Frank, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. I'm
just going to pull you up for a little goodbye, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.